Welcome. I hope you're doing well. Today we're going to be taking a look at how we can create this environment in Blender. It's not a tutorial per se, but you're going to be able to see me doing it in real time, explaining what I'm doing as I go. But don't expect me to say that I'm moving the cube by 15 millimeters. We're going to just keep it chill, keep it relaxed, put Blender in the background, put this video on the side, and model on your own as well. And I'm sure you're going to learn a few things here and there. And yeah, let's just get right into it. And I hope you're going to enjoy this video. Before we start, let's look at what we're going to need for this video. So you might want to use Blender Kit, especially if you're going for a more complex environment. I mostly use it here for some HDRIs and some materials on my car. You're also going to need the add-on called Light Studio, Leomoon Light Studio. I put a link in the description. It's free, but you can also support the creator. I strongly suggest that you do, especially if you're going to use it for commercial purposes. I think it's a great add-on and everyone should support it if you're going to use it. The other thing I'm going to use is screencast keys. So you're going to be able to see my keys in the bottom left over here. That should be big enough. Let's just increase that a tiny bit more. Perfect. Now, I also want to go over some organization tips before we start. That's going to make your life so much easier. Now, for the collections and layers, I like to have a collection for my car or my subject. That will help for light linking. I also want a collection where I put my cameras and my empties. Just so, for example, if I need an empty to parent the camera for animation, or if I need an empty for depth of field, for example, these all go in there. Now, I also want a collection for my lights. That way it's making it super simple to control all of them. I might have sub-collections if I need different light setups, depending on the camera angle. And the other one is going to be the environment collection. Let's start putting some stuff into the environment collection. So I'm going to place my cursor on the world origin. I'm going to add a mesh, just a plane, just going to serve as a basic floor. I want the tires to clip slightly. I'm going to make it quite big right here. Then I'm going to extrude 3 sides. You could do it with 2 or 3. Let's make it a tiny bit bigger. But I would recommend not using it on 4 sides, especially if you're using a smaller kind of studio floor than me, or if you're relying on HDRI. In our case, we're probably going to use a lot more studio lights than HDRI today, so it might not matter that much, but I like to not completely close off my studio. So this is perfect. Let's go in camera view and see what it looks like, and that's good. I don't want to see the end of the bevel or the radius here. I really want to see it as a smooth gradient. Here, not have any HDRI for now, any light source. Let's just add one for now. It doesn't need to be high resolution. We're only going to use it in the beginning for some basic light. Also, you want some materials on your object. Here I used some very simple one just because my laptop didn't like recording and having my complex car paint, so now it's just a principled BSDF. But yeah, set it up like you would for your final renders, and it should be fine. Also, let's place the camera. For your camera, I would recommend a focal length that's a bit higher than the default 50. Here I'm going to go with some kind of 85 or 90. I'm not a super superstitious guy in the sense that if it looks good, it looks good. But usually higher gives better results, up to a certain extent, of course. And now for the environment, what I want is something super punchy, yet very simple. So what I would say is, are the main ingredients, is that you have a studio floor like this. This allows you to project some kind of patterns or textures. And also, if you're going to use some strong area light, that you can reduce the spread to create some really cool graphic patterns on there. So that's very important to not use the shadow catcher option unless you really want the transparent background. I would also say that the next thing is going to be some kind of simple background element that's not distracting, that we can repeat. And I don't want to say abstract, but It could be just some kind of pillars or some very simple things. Here, I'm going to use some kind of triangular pillars. I'm just going to add a plane, go in edit mode, move it to the side, and then these guys merge at center to create some triangle. It's perfect. And we'll just extrude it like this. We can add a bevel modifier now as well. And let me move those two objects into the environment collection, just so we make sure that it's nice and tidy. Here, that's good. Looking good for me. Let's play with the materials now. So one cool trick is to color the floor. I know a lot of people keep it either at some kind of dark or neutral color. I like to play with colors here, just because then you get some really nice bounce lights on there, which really punch your shots. So if I go in camera view, because that's quite important to work most of the time in camera view, especially if you have a specific angle that you need. In my case, I don't, but I'm going to use this view as my main view. So I'm going to start placing the pillars around, duplicating them with Alt-D. I just want to kind of block out the shot, figure out the composition that I like. So right here, I like to have something close to the camera that builds up some depth, especially when we're going to add some depth of field. And I would not recommend placing an object super close to the car, like here, because it really is going to kind of suffocate the car or the object. So always leave some breathing room for your subject. Especially that here, maybe it would have been looking fine, but then as soon as you move a little bit, it's going to look horrible. So I would say, let's keep it at a distance. I'm just going to try to play with some diagonals, some lines for here. Cool, like this. And I'm really not trying to have a specific, I don't have a specific idea in mind. I'm really just going with the flow, seeing what comes, and be welcome to the happy accidents. So let's just add a third one. This guy could put a bit like this, or in the other direction. Now, this might seem tedious, and sometimes it can be, but I think it's very important that you really nail the aesthetic, or at least the kind of visual concept that you want to express for your other shot or your environment. So this step is very crucial. So take the time you need. It's going to save you time in the long run. So this is getting somewhere. Let's see if we start adding a bit of light. So I'm going to click on the layer on the collection of light. I'm going to add an area lamp first. Let's scale it so it's a bit bigger. And over here in the light settings, you have the under beam shape, the spread. I like to reduce the spread a lot. So somewhat close to 0, often at 0. And you're going to see these are the kind of graphic shapes that I meant before. So you can play with this and combine them with textures to become to have like a super strong effect. And if you crank it to 180, you get this super diffuse light, which is not bad, but I really like to play around with those super strong lights. So now with this, I'm just aiming to create some cool shadows or something to kind of help even more with the composition and make it more interesting. So let's play around a little bit more with this. This should not be visible. I'm not too worried about the lighting of the car, because usually I will have a separate light setup for the car. This is where the add-on Leomoon Light Studio comes in handy, and then we use it in combination with light linking. And then it allows you to have some very different effects from the background for your main subject. Already, this is super interesting. It kind of creates this zigzag effect where this seems to be going this way, then you have this, and then this guy is blocking the view. I think I'm really gonna start playing with this one a little bit more. Let's see if the materials we can improve. Just increase a little bit for shaded photo smooth. Perfect. Let's see if we can play with the materials on this guy. Get more interest. These days I like the monochrome look a lot. Let's see if in this case it makes sense or if it just becomes a bit too boring. Maybe it's the car that should become... Let's leave the car white and even increase the roughness a little bit. Now, normally I have a better car paint than this, but for performance reason, I didn't use it. But it should be fine. Let's leave them at white for now. I think we can come back to them later. What I'm gonna do now is go over here on the Light Studio add-on. If you don't have it enabled, just go to turn it on in your preference. Here you can create the Light Studio. It adds this empty as well as a collection over there. And every light you're going to add through the add-on will kind of pivot around this empty, which is very convenient because now, if I press this plus button, it will add lamp. I can move the distance slider to bring it closer. You can see it's here. And if I press G to move it, you can see it will always face this empty. And in this case, it's the center of the scene where the car is. Super useful. And here we can use it in combination with light linking. So if we go over here to the object properties, the orange little square, you can go over here under shading, under light linking, and then this is why you want it to be very organized. I can just say car, and now it only affects the car. So here I'm just looking to create some nice light for the vehicle. I would not recommend turning the light linking on as soon as you add the lamp. Play with it first, then see if you need it. Because too much light linking can just look unnatural and sometimes not look that good. So here I just want to kind of bring the shape of the car to life. In this case, I think the light linking could make some sense. One of the slider that's quite important is the gradient switch. It adds this gradient effect. If I go turn on the control panel, you're going to see the lamp is here. And if I turn on the gradient switch, you can see it becomes, let's remove the mask. You're going to see it becomes like this spherical gradient. And here you can play around with different shapes. Let's just play a little bit more. I'm going to duplicate this lamp, bring it on the other side. And here we can use the color saturation slider just to get a little bit of an orange tint to the car. I mean, we could go with some contrast with some blue tint, for example, but I think here I just want to keep it quite simple and fairly monochromatic. Let's switch up light texture just so we get something a bit stronger. This is getting quite nice. Here, let's add another lamp maybe for the front. You don't want to overdo it. You don't want to have like 8 lamps or or too many, because then it just becomes messy and difficult to control. See, if I isolate this lamp, we can see what it's doing by pressing the little star. And this is something that I would like to highlight. So if I can, I will try to get it to show up with this lamp. So right now I'm only previewing what this lamp is doing. I'm going to turn off the HDRI completely just to really see what this one is doing as clearly as I can. Yeah, not too bad, okay. And here the HDRI only serve as kind of a fill light, just to fill the space so we don't have too much pure black area in the image. Here, let's make this a little bit bigger. The car is still a work in progress, so I'm not really worried about like tiny details or showing off the car in the best way as possible. I'm just doing this to show you guys that you can quickly get something super cool. And look, I just pivoted the camera and moved on the top, and this is what I meant by those super graphic shapes that are super cool. Just the area lamp is creating this, and with a little bit of tweaking, a lot of potential is there. So I would strongly encourage that you move around your scene a little bit and don't just get stuck in the first camera angle you see. But in my case, I'm just going to keep it like that for now. Because those pillars are closed volumes, which means they're just like, they're not a single skin, we have closed both ends. We can maybe try to have them be some kind of translucent material. So I'm going to reduce the roughness a little bit, then go to transmission and increase it. Let's increase the roughness even more. And here we can color them. So this can become quite interesting very quickly. Of course, we can become even more fancy by adding some gradients, some lights in there. I think in this case, maybe some kind of noise texture could be cool, just so we have a little bit more interest going on the surface. So I'm going to switch to object, click on it, add noise. And right now my roughness is 0.5, roughly 0.5. I don't want it to be super shiny, because then it just becomes pure glass and reflects too much. And I don't want it to be pure like roughness at 1, because then it just reflects everything in the super diffuse matter. So I want to keep it around 5. I'm going to add a map range. And what this guy does is it's going to limit, let's say, my noise texture that you're seeing here between values that we're going to tell him. So let's say here, right now, it's limiting it between 0 and 1. If I increase it between 0.4 to maximum 0.6, it's going to do something very similar to what we had before, where it's taking these and the black areas become 0.4 and the white areas become 0.6, and then mix in between for all the kind of remaining values, so to speak. I think we can reduce it maybe a tiny bit. So this is looking all right. What we can do is maybe even use a Fresnel node. And I like to use it simply because it creates very interesting effects. I want to use it as a mask in this case. So let's see if I use it as a little bit of unrealistic values. You can see here now we have white and black. So in node language, sorry, that means that we can use it as a factor to control it, let's say, between a mix. So if I use it for the color, plug the Fresnel here, and let's say we wanted to alternate between this orange and between this blue. What it's going to do is the black areas are going to be the orange, for example, and the white one are going to be the blue. And so we can use it to create quite interesting effects. Not necessarily in the color, but in the roughness or with textures in general. So let's say we invert that. So this. See, in this case, it's not very interesting, but it's always good to know that you can do that if you want. Let's make this a little bit brighter. And now what I'm going to do is go in edit mode, duplicate it, and then press Alt S to scale along the normals. So we have something inside our volume. So if I leave now, you're going to see, we can see the other little crystal that we inserted inside. So this is quite cool. This is going to start to add a little bit more interest to our texture and our object. I'm just going to give it a second material over there. And this one, let's see if we can have it glow a little bit. Okay, that's a bit strong. But I'm liking what it's doing. Let's see if we can add a gradient node. And now this might seem silly, but it's really those tiny details that make or break a render. Here, just adding it quickly to see if it helps. I'm going to set it to multiply, just so we can control the strength a bit more effectively. And here I feel like our cubes are competing with the area lamp now. So let's see if we can increase the strength of the area lamp over here. Or maybe move it a little bit. What if we also give it some kind of color? So even though I was really happy with the look of the area lamp at first, I'm not bound to it. I'm really just playing around and see what comes up. So here this division is quite cool. I don't necessarily think it matches with the car. Like the car has those very vertical and stiff lines, so maybe it just serves as a nice contrast. Can keep. Maybe it's gonna look out of place. Let's see. I'm adding back some spread to the lamp, playing around with it. I think we can also get closer to the car. And maybe by increasing the focal length, we can have the car occupy a bit more space in the frame. And now I'm not in a rush, so I'm just really playing around, trying to find things I like. This I think is quite interesting. I'm gonna keep it, add a second area lamp that I can duplicate and move. And by pressing G and then Y twice, or any other axes twice, I can move it in the local axis. So instead of being limited to the global one, I can move it, let's say, normal to the lamp orientation, like this, or like this, which is super useful. Now let's go back in here so we have a better view at what we're doing. think I want to give the car a bit more space, at least in the front, so it can breathe a little bit. Now I think some car paint will help the car, so I'm gonna go back to my old one and let's see if my laptop likes it. Okay, nice. I think what we're lacking is maybe a bit of a stronger rim light over here. So if I take this guy, which had the orange saturation, and turn it down, I think that could be quite helpful. Here, let's make the glass a bit darker. I don't want it to look so transparent, and we can add some kind of seed. For seeds, don't overcomplicate your life if you're not going to do some photoreal stuff or you're not doing final renders. I'm not doing anything close to final. I'm just going to put a cube over here, shape it a little bit, and then we're going to be good to go. So I'll just taper the top, move everything down over here, then mirror it. And there we go. This will already give it a tiny bit of credibility. And then if you want to make it a bit smoother, just add a subdivision surface and it will take care of rounding these things off for you if it becomes a problem. Now let's see if we can play with the roughness of the floor to add some interesting highlights or details. Now metallic was not helping at all. Let's see if we reduce that. And we can play with the color of the car, of course. So here I'm just going to block out a bit more the composition. I was starting to feel a bit stuck and not really sure of what I could improve or do to improve it, because I knew it was not perfect or good enough, at least for what I was hoping. So now I'm starting to move into a different area, and what I would suggest is that we try a different angle if we see that it's still not good enough. So here I would just try to put down a little bit and then duplicate my camera and start moving around. So I'll switch camera, use the walk navigation so I can move with WASD, which is quite useful, probably my favorite method moving camera. This guy, I just wanted to go into the ground, so that way, if we end up using a different angle, he can still stay there. But already, you can see how interesting this can become quite quickly. Ah, yes. Also, let's switch back to the first camera. I forgot to add some depth of field, so let's just go do this. I'll just use the focus distance, put it somewhere on the car, And I know everyone says now to use the ratio set to 2, because it's more cinematographic or cinematic or whatever. I like to reduce it below 1 at really extreme values. Sometimes it can give you super interesting result, especially when you're not going for a final model and you don't necessarily want to show every tiny detail, but more of the big picture. And it creates those really interesting and really strong bokeh effect. And that's what I like about it. So here it's a bit too intense, but you can really start playing with it and it becomes super cool. Now I also want to keep tweaking my texture inside of those magma tubes. So I'll just go over here, click on these guys, maybe the emissive one. We can use a wave texture. The wave is just going to control, in this case, the color. So it's going to alternate between this yellow that we had before and this black. Let's preview this. Perfect. That's the direction I had in mind at first. Let's see if it looks okay. I think we can add a little bit more to it. So here it's not giving the results I intended. Not looking bad per se, but it's not really adding anything. So I'm probably just going to keep it like this, very, very subtle, so that you barely see it. Because it's not harming anyone. And if we end up having some kind of high resolution animation where we have a bit more samples, it can be a nice little extra detail. Now what I think we can do is duplicate this, make it a little bit more tiny. And this one I'm going to duplicate with Shift D, because I want to give it the same material as the floor. And the reason for this is that we can add a little bit more interest to our floor simply by giving it some height difference. And in this case, it's going to be done with these guys. We're going to serve as like little bumpy rocks or whatever, because this is some kind of rally or gravel sports car. I think it can be a little nice detail. I'm just going to do Alt D now, once I have one made. Place them around and see what it looks like. Cool. Let's switch back to our other angle, other camera at least, and then we can place it around. Turn back on the overlays. Have this camera angle. Here I'm gonna do GZZ just to move it along the local Z. And this is happening because the clip start is a bit too far. I thought it was. Maybe, good question. Could it be the different type of light paths? Or one of our light is intersecting. There we go. So let's just increase the distance a tiny bit until it doesn't do that. Perfect. Let's move this down. Then add depth of field. And I think this can be quite an interesting look. Now, I don't want this one to be kind of left hanging. I think it could be nicer if it was kind of connecting over here. Or we disconnect it really a lot. But no, in this case, let's make it go all the way there. Perfect. So normally if I mean, let's do it. I was just about to say, normally I would darken this one because it's in the foreground. And I don't want it to draw so much attention. You can even maybe, yeah, true. Because it's instance with Alt D, it would affect the other one. So if you want to change the material of an instance without kind of breaking that link, you can click on this little icon over here and change it to object instead of data. And then you can give it any other material and it won't affect the other one. I'm just creating a copy, then giving it a bit more of this orange tint. And we can even increase the roughness a little bit. Let's make it brighter again. I think it was better. Cool. Here the light is the problem on the car. So what I would do is duplicate the profile. Let's say copy profile. And now what this allows us to do is have separate profiles for different cameras. So let's say I move this one around, or let's say I disable both of them and go over here. You can see it's still turned on and the light would not have changed. Here I'm just going to move this one around until I'm happy. This is, I think, looks quite nice. The way it flows over there. This is not bad either. I think it might be fighting a little bit with the previous one. So let's just move it down. Then this guy, what is it doing? This is quite important to preview your light all at once. Otherwise, you can end up with too many lights simply because you're not really sure what each one of them is doing. In this case, maybe having some kind of rim light on the back would be cool. Let's see. Turn them all back on. And I think this one's a bit too much. I would delete it, or whoops, not this one, sorry. I meant this guy over here, so let's just press the minus. We could have a bit more light over there and keep tweaking it, of course, but then just becomes like a matter of how long do you want the video to be. In my case, I will try to keep it short to save you some time. I don't want to take too much of yours. So if I switch to this guy, I really like this texture because it's much more warm than the other ones. So for kind of warm environments like this, works really well. So just switch these two as well. Go back here. Perfect. And now one issue that you might have is if your HDRI has a really strong coloration. So what I want to do is keep the same lighting from the HDRI, but I want to remove the saturation from it. So I'll go over here, back to the world shading, and then between the image texture and the background, I'm going to put a hue saturation value and just drag the saturation to 0, just to make sure that it's not having any weird impact. And maybe we can bump up the strength a little bit now. That was maybe a bit too much because it's giving a lot of light in the background. But at this stage is where I would kind of start taking some screenshots, saving them, or just playing around with the compositor. So what you can do is maybe boost a little, it's a bit much, but it can be quite interesting. Saturation, give this guy the same material at the front. I think it can become quite interesting. So let's just take the camera, duplicate it, and then move to the next shot. What I like to do is to really use those pillars as part of the composition or to create some interesting one. And usually once you have a few, you can manage to really just find new angles that are interesting straight from the box. Straight out of the box. So I'll just copy my profile again, turn off the lights just because I want to see what I'm doing. I'll just take this one, duplicate it, rotate it, just move it over here, S, and then Shift ZZ to exclude that axis. And this one, I think, could be more vertical. And here it's casting a really strong shadow, and we can use that shadow to our advantage. Let's say, kind of block out this area, or we could rotate the floor, because I'm assuming the floor also blocks some of that light. to create something a bit more interesting. But in this case, let's just keep it like this. So it's kind of blocking the light coming from here. Now I don't want to see it in the shot, but I want the shadows that it's casting. So I'll just make it bigger. You can see how big it is. So that's proves the importance of having objects outside the field of your camera. It's often very useful to have them like that. This guy, let's just scale it again. And let's just give it back the other material. I think it will look better for this shot. And now we can start playing with the light here. It doesn't look too bad already. I just wanted to make sure I was not using any compositing effect, like glare or anything like that for now. So, nice room light, pretty cool. This one is blowing out everything. Let's maybe use gradient switch. And I'm going to use a gradient over there, kind of try to control where this light is shining. Cool. Here it might be a bit too harsh. I think it's this area lamp that is probably not helping, or just the design of the car in itself. I mean, it could be a lot of different things. And I don't want to take too much of your time. I'll try to conclude this one quickly, and then we can move on into the final result with a little bit of compositing and post effects put on top. I think just make it a bit more interesting. And now some of the changes I'm doing with the cubes can influence the other shots. So sometimes you have to be careful. Around here now this is becoming distracting, so I would probably hide it for this shot. I would probably just move it to another collection and call it, for example, a front recorder or something like that, and just disable them when it comes to the time to do the shot that I need in particular. This guy, same for this one. Let's just scale it so it continues all the way there. Rotate it a tiny bit. That. Cool. So I think that will be it for this video. I hope you learned something. If you found something useful, please let me know. You can follow me on Instagram, on Behance, on wherever. You can find me on Discord as well. If you have any question, please ask in the comments. If you have any specific problems or ideas for next ones, I will be super happy to answer you, to help you out if you have questions. And once again, thank you for watching. Thank you for taking the time and for creating with me. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.